got it. Okay, that's fine.
Right, we've got recording. Thank you so much, Elena. All good. So, yeah, so we went through what is the different types of leadership. We talked about where is the most appropriate place for some of those styles and what drives those, if you remember. And then last week, we talked about the global aspect. What does it mean to lead people across cultures? Whether it's the culture of the country, whether it's the culture of the company that you're in, and that's where we were. Now, these were the 3 sessions that define our terms. You know, this is global leadership module. So what is leadership? What does it all mean in different situations? What's global? That's where we are. Now we're getting to okay, so now we understand, so what? What are we going to do about this? How will this work for us? And so today's session is about how you develop leadership. It's about why should you invest in leadership development and how you can make it a successful investment. Now, I'd like to have 2 different perspectives on this. One is an organizational perspective, which looks at the businesses, or not even businesses, institutions, and say, what is the situation for those institutions investing in talent and leadership talent specifically? Second thing is, you guys as leaders, what works best for you to develop yourself? And as leaders, how do you develop the talent below you? Okay, so those are the 2 perspectives: organization, the leader, and then how they develop themselves, how you develop the talent below you. And that's what we're going to talk about today. At around 1:15, I have a gentleman called Andy Callahan joining us. He is the head of learning and development for Action Group, which are a huge engineering company that deals with undersea and oceanic energy. They're a global company, and Andy and I have been friends for many, many years and been in conferences and making speeches together, etc., on this topic. And he's a practitioner. And I used to be a practitioner, but he's the current practitioner. So I thought it would be beneficial for you to hear from somebody who's got the direct responsibility for developing leadership capability. And he presented yesterday, and he's going to be presenting to us on Zoom today. And he'll join us at 1:15. Okay, so let's kick off. Everything okay so far? Any questions? All right. So, you know me, I like to take a historical perspective. In historical terms, we as human beings have been competing with each other for the resources that make us prosperous. And in the history of the world, what made people prosperous was land. The more land you had, the more wealth you'd have, the more taxes you could charge, the more resources you'd have at your disposal. And people went to war, battles, great conquerors, and all of those were over land. What then happened was Industrial Revolution happened. And with industrialization, land wasn't the key for wealth and prosperity. It was capital. And we became capitalists. Or at least in the West, a lot of us became capitalists. Even in the East, I think that was the whole idea, is you create a factory, you create a service proposition, a product proposition, and you then use that to generate wealth, prosperity, and success for yourself. And that was the secret to success. We went from feudal to capitalist. What's happening now is that with the new technology, it's information, it's knowledge, and it's capability that's driving prosperity. So we are becoming, as Klaus here was saying at the World Economic Forum, we become talentists. Companies like Google, companies like Apple, the essence of that company really is the innovation that the people they have bring to the market. The knowledge economy, all the various different industries that are currently growing, whether it's AI, robotics, nanotechnology, virtual reality, genetics, all these new fields. These are fast-growing fields that are knowledge platforms. It's not about a factory. It's not about the capital you've invested. It's about intellectual value. And so really, this idea of talentism has created what McKinsey called the war for talent. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, why is talent important? Because in almost everything you want to do in your business to achieve its strategic objectives, you're going to need to have the right talent and right capability to deliver it. Whether it's maximizing and retaining your base, the growth, whether geographic growth or product growth, new innovation, gaining market share in something, going into a new venture, merging with another company, whatever it is, you're going to need the right people to get this done. So it's become absolutely essential. Now, what are companies saying? Companies are saying they can't find those people. 34% of companies globally are saying, actually, this has got worse. This is from 2011, this chart. I used this in a conference. You can see me using it on, if you YouTube me, I was speaking at the conference about this. It's got much worse, much worse. Companies are talking about their problem in finding the right talent more and more. And yet, 205 million unemployed globally. And by the way, that unemployed figure doesn't include all those people who are not registered for work because they don't think they'll get it. I'm sorry to say this, but all the housewives, for example, in lots of big countries, not registered as unemployed, but they could potentially be employed. A lot of other people are not in that statistic. A lot of the third world or developing markets, they don't even have proper statistics. So we've got these two phenomena going on. You got huge number of people who are unemployed and say they want work. And I remember this from countries like Saudi, the young people wanting to find work and the government wanting to get work for them, etc. And in Turkey and in other markets that I've worked in. And yet companies are saying they're not finding it easy to fill vacancies. So what's going on? What do you think is going on? Anyone? What's happening here between the unemployed and the companies finding it so difficult in the emerging market and in the developing market to find the right people to fill their vacancies? What's going on? Have you guys ever come across a concept called employability? Employability is about individuals that fit the profile that the companies want, because this is how it works. Somebody needs something done, an activity, right? I have a target to achieve. I have a strategy I want to deliver. And in order to do that, this activity needs to take place. Okay, do we have anyone who can do the activity? No, our people are fully employed. We need someone new. Okay, so let me see what I need done. I need these things done. Okay, if I group these things together, seem to actually be very similar activities together. I'll call that a job or a role, because these are series of activities that the similar kind of skill level, similar kind of knowledge, similar requirements from that person, whether full-time, part-time, or a location or whatever, I can put them together and I could call that a job. All right, so if I want these activities done, and these are the measures of how good those activities need to be done, what kind of person do I need who's going to be able to do that? And what they come up with is they come up with what they call a person profile to fit their job description. And the person profile is for the perfect person for that job. So I need this qualification, I need this experience, I need these personal characteristics, and blah, blah, blah. And they come up with this very tight definition. And then they give it to someone, to HR or whoever else, saying, okay, find me this person. I want to then check if they have the requirements for this job, and then I give them the job. And then I test them on the job. So what you've got is you've got a very wide range of people with lots of different capabilities, and you make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller till it's this job. And most of the time, if there's been someone who did that job for you previously, or you had an experience in another company place of somebody doing that job, you already have something in mind. And that what you have in mind is quite tight, because that's the person that you saw doing this job. And you want someone like that. In fact, you wrote the role profile with that in your mind. And those 205 million people who have talent, who have capability, but they don't have that job requirements because you've made it tight. Sometimes necessarily tight because there's a legal requirement for someone to have a particular qualification or a particular skill. So health and safety, you don't want to fail at what you want to do. So you want to make it as close to the requirements as possible. So I get that, but most of the time too tight. And you're not going to take risks. Why should you? You put the pressure on HR or whoever to go and recruit for you that person that you want, and exactly that model of the person that you're looking for. In fact, I told the story yesterday. I'll tell it again today. When I was going for a job with a major retailer, I went for one of the 9 interviews that I had for that job with the HR director. And she sat me down, and I thought, okay, she's going to talk to me about my qualification, my experience, how I like to get things done, etc. Not a bit of it. It was a really lovely chat. She wanted to know where I was brought up, who my father was, who my mother was, what they did, their level of education, the major influences on my life, whether I had siblings, if they were younger than me or older than me, what sports I did, etc. And I thought, oh, what a lovely chat. And I was really relaxed because it wasn't a classic interview. And I went home. Once I got the job with those guys, I realized that this was an interview, but it's called a biodata interviewing. Have you guys ever heard of biodata interviewing? It's illegal. Because what you do is you find the best people who've ever done this job that you know of. For example, a financial controller. All right, who are the best financial controllers I've ever known? These are the best financial controllers we have ever known, who did exactly what we want them to do. And then you look at them and say, okay, you know what? They're all men. Oh my God, they're all over 6 foot. They're all very physically fit. They're all first child of a professional father and a housewife mother. They all went to this kind of school. They all went, and what you do is you're replicating that person based on their bio. Now, that's not fair. That's unjust. That's illegal in most countries. By the way, you're not improving things for your company. You are staying with what you know. But this is what, it's illegal. People don't do this consciously now, but they do it unconsciously when they actually want to recruit a talent. What is leadership talent? What does that leadership talent look like? Does it need to look like this person, feel like that person, speak with the same accent that that person, come from that school? All of that narrows your thinking and narrows the field. And you leave a lot of talent that you could have used. And you're paying over the odds for the talent that everybody else is after as well, because they look like the part. And that's what's happening here. Employability is a problem. There is talent out there. These 205 people either have the talent or have the potential for that talent, but is not being realized. Because we are after those very, very few people that look right, have got the right CV, have got the right experience, and can prove it. And that is what's going wrong with the war on talent. And this is happening at the global level. Absolutely at the global level. People are going in and saying, right, this is the person I want. They would have worked in these places. They would speak these languages, all the rest of it. And what you're finding is those people are very few and everyone's after them. Everyone's after them. When you've got the right profile, you work for the right brands, you know the industry, you've been in a few countries, and you can, you've got the right CV, you can actually dictate. You are in demand, therefore you are in charge. And that's the top 5%, maybe 1% or whatever in the market. And those people are not necessarily the best people that you could have. And they will definitely be the most expensive people. I can tell you for nothing. But you're leaving behind tons of talent on the ground. I'll give you one more example. When I worked for a major bank in UK, my early career, I was responsible for recruitment. And one of the things we used to do was we used to develop our own program for assistant branch managers and branch managers to make sure they were the right standard. We used to give them training in the banking, and we used to get them a qualification, everything. But I used to recruit 250 graduates a year for a program which is 2 years, and I had 500 graduates whose payroll and responsibility were on my budget, and I used to then appoint them as assistant branch managers in various branches around the country. And we always recruited from the best universities, people with great degrees, and we used to have them, we used to call them cardboard cutouts, because they all looked very similar, they all had similar experiences, they dressed the same, we trained them to be the same, so there was a consistent quality to our branch managers, and who then represented us for their career, and they stayed with us forever, most of the time. Anyway, this 2-year program was extremely expensive, and I worked out that we were losing something like over 30%, I think it was exactly 31% of our graduates in the last 6 to 3 months of their 2-year, where other building societies, other banks would be coming, offering them huge salaries, and would be stealing them from us when we recruited them, trained them, and it was dreadful. And this is what I inherited from the previous person who was doing this job. So I decided to fix it. And I decided that I was going to take 30% or more of our intake, not from graduates, but from other pools of talent. And a particular pool of talent that I decided to go for were women returners. These are ladies who've been having children and were therefore out of work, but now the children are going into school and they now want to come back to the workforce. And I also said that they don't need to have degrees. They can have what we call high national diplomas, which is a 2-year thing, or even A-levels as they have them in England at the time. You won't believe the amount of shock in the organization that I was not recruiting graduates from the top universities anymore. Now, but I was still recruiting them. I was just taking some of them from elsewhere and taking 40-year-old plus women instead of 21, 22-year-old graduates. The impact was immediate. These became top performing individuals. The rate of turnover went down. We saved, I think, 1.3 million British pounds sterling per year at the cost of the turnover as it went down at the time. They were better linked with the community they served. They were more mature, easier to train. They didn't leave the company. All in all. So this is an example that really set in my mind that you need to challenge continuously. What is talent, especially leadership talent? What does leadership talent look like? You remember last week we talked about the filters that we have in our communication, all the biases that we're not maybe even aware of. Checking that, immediate benefit to you. I got immediate benefit in my job in thinking broadly about this. Because in the end, it's about supply and demand. And that supply of the people who look right and whatever is in short supply and is getting smaller. and may not be geographically mobile, may not be in all the industries in equal share. But the general talent is all over the place. And we talk about war for talent, and people are losing the war for talent because they're not challenging what is talent. And they're not challenging themselves in terms of what they need. So in the new world that we're moving into, and remember all the things we said about the leadership challenge, about the massive rate of change, the unpredictability of that change, and the kinds of uncertainties that the world now faces, and increasingly so. What got us here will not get us where we are. We talked about the old leaders, the leadership styles may not be as appropriate. Certainly culture by culture, they're not appropriate. And also the methodology we used isn't going to be working the same way. So what was the methodology that had been working? You know, we're talking about, this is about the challenges we face. So the economic challenges in terms of the globalization and the global challenges that we have, the projected job growth for that is happening, where the needs are going to increase, the business strategies and the new economy and the requirements of the new economy that are very different. And the smart companies will need an integrated process. We'll talk about that. Almost all of these strategies and situations, whether economic, political, or social and cultural, increase the need for leadership. And yeah, that's the situation we're in, that it's about the right people in the right job, which is what we've always said. But because your needs are changing all the time, you need to have flexible talent in the pipeline, and a pipeline that is sure to deliver the level and the quality that you need going into the future. So how did things work in the past? You were working in a more stable environment where the change was more predictable. So you knew what you were going to need. You knew the numbers, you knew the type of leader you need, and you knew the kind of experiences that they needed to have in order to make that work. In the new world, it's very complex, it's very volatile, very unpredictable. You don't even know exactly what you're going to need. You're going to need, therefore, to have more flexibility in the type of capability, a generally better quality individual that can know rather than a very specific type. And the skills are going to need to be more broad and transformational. Remember, we talked about transformational change. We talked about Kolb, somebody who can very quickly learn from the experiences. Therefore, they need, I mean, we'll come to talk about this in a minute. You don't want people who already have all the skills. That's impossible. But you want people with potential. You want people who can acquire those skills and capability faster and more broadly and surer than an average person. That's the key. And therefore, the need for development is going up. The human capital you need in the firm needs to have some spec capacity, because you don't know what's coming around the corner. That unpredictable demand is what's driving the need for extra capability and flexibility. And somebody who can think outside the box and not go back to what how things have always been. And individuals still need to be able to continuously improve their performance. And like I said, challenging who is the talent, diversity and inclusion, to make people more employable. You know, how many disabled people do you have? How many? What's the market for disabled talent? You know, somebody in a wheelchair, can they do this job? Somebody with some disability, whatever it is it absolutely required that this person has full use of that thing? Can they not do the job? We really need to think broadly about ethnicity, about sexual orientation, about disability, about all, different backgrounds, different industries they've worked in, different styles. All of that is a positive in winning this war. And there's all kinds of other things going on that you need to align with. So certain countries, you need to recruit local talent. It's a requirement in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, in Qatar, now in UAE, in other places. You know, it's a legal requirement. You need to create that culture you want to create. So whatever you do needs to be within a context of the evolution of your culture. You need to make sure that your leadership is creating that culture. Therefore, it's the right quality and consistency. You need to make sure that the employees as a whole feel that they're being looked after as human beings, like we talked about last week. And that you're dealing with people in a fair and equitable way, and that the right diversity is being put in place. These are initiatives, and in developing people, all of these other initiatives need to also be aligned, also need to be incorporated. The recipe for success in the talent war is very simple. You need to ascertain what your company is going to need. You need to then acquire that, develop it, then make sure those people stay with you and are engaged and are giving their best. Simple, really simple. I mean, I've had this slide for 20 years. This hasn't changed. It is what it is. Every element of this is incredibly complex and difficult to get right. But first of all, there's a plus between, the need for talent and acquiring and developing that talent, but there's a multiplier for the talent engagement and retention. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's a multiplier for the one in the below? Anyone? Any ideas? If you're acquiring a new person, what we call a FTD, full-time equivalent headcount. You're recruiting one, you're recruiting two, you're recruiting three. They're adding. But if that person is engaged, and if that person, for example, is a leader and there's a team below them, the impact of the right person at leadership level is a multiplier of everybody who's under them and reporting to them. They create energy, discretionary effort, innovation, creativity that multiply the impact they have on the bottom line and on the success of the business. Not just another FTE. I have this many call center people, and here's one more. I have this many salespeople. Here's one more. That's a plus. But bringing the talent that's going to be in the pipeline, that's going to be in leadership, is a multiplier. It's so much more important. By the way, so is bringing the wrong person in. Let me say something right now as far as the talent acquisition is concerned. You're going to look at the person's history as an indication of the future performance. It's all you have. It's all you're able to do to an extent. So it's completely natural. But there's no guarantee. According to a lot of research, including one from Korn Ferry, the headhunters, the majority of the major moves don't deliver the value that was envisaged, even though that person had been hugely successful in previous cultures, previous companies, previous roles. There's no guarantee that in your company, in your role, they're going to be as good or even adequate. Because each one of those things is the context. Remember, we talked about leadership and performance of that leader being within the context. Maybe they don't get on with this boss. Maybe they have a team that's different for them. Maybe somebody in the team doesn't match with them. There are literally millions of different variables that are going to affect the performance that you cannot control. So every single time is guesswork. Best guess, better than tossing a coin, because you're using methodology to minimize your bias and to try and be as scientific as possible. And you improve that. But let's put it this way. I used to hire in Ocean Coca-Cola between 550, 600 people per year, me and my team. And it's impossible to for you to say that every single time or in all cases you made the right decision and you brought the best person that there was for that role. Impossible. In fact, it's a ludicrously stupid thing to say because it's just not logical. The chances are we recruited a large number of these people who were not the best people for the job or even adequate for the job and who will fail or fail to deliver what we expect. And that we didn't hire and rejected an awful lot of people who would have been absolutely brilliant in the job. Now, when you're head of recruitment or HR or even the CEO, there's nothing you can do about that. So you accept it. I'm going to do the best I can. And what I do is I use systems, methodologies, techniques that I have checked are improving my chances of making the right decision. Fewer of the best people get rejected. Fewer of the worst people get recruited. But nevertheless, it happens. Here's the thing. Remember what we said before about some of the leaders who are exploitative, selfish, narcissistical, political, all about them, who create maybe short-term wins for themselves, but long-term, they destroy the culture, and long-term, they destroy value. You recruit those people in haste, you regret at your leisure. Those people are not trainable. On the whole, you're not going to bring somebody who is very self-centered and thinking only about themselves and say, you know what, I'm going to put them through training and then they're going to be fixed. Unless they've had major head trauma, which changes their personality, and apparently that's possible. I've seen it happen. They're not going to change their personality. You might train them to hide it better, but you're not going to change their motives and what drives them as a human being. And if they don't care about their followers and other people, you're not going to make them care by training them. So acquisition of that talent is absolutely key before you make them better versions of themselves through talent development rather than changing them. So anyway, spend a lot of time on this, but this is the crunch of what we're talking about here. And we're going to focus on the talent development for now. But of course, the whole idea of talent acquisition assessment is its own topic, which we could talk about, and I've been doing for 36 years. So, there's plenty to talk about there. But the focus of our module is on talent development. And the processes that people use are very simple here. You go through the selection process, whatever you have. Then you assess people's performance against KPIs, against their role profiles, against expectation, which is the appraisal system. And then you reward them, you provide them with learning and development to maximize their performance. And then if they're successful, you promote them and they become successors for the more senior roles. That's the alignment of the previous slide, what you're trying to do with the processes that exist in the business. But what are you going to need? That's the starting point, wasn't it? What are your needs? And your needs need to align with your business requirements. Has anyone come across this before? This, what they call the Greek pyramid. It's from Professor Porter from Harvard Business School, who has a book on strategy, and of course is one of the major thinking on business strategy. And it's his model, which I've used again and again. The pyramid at the top is the vision. So what's your vision for your company? I've put an example but I mean, something more specific about your sector, about, where are we going? What's the direction long term? How do we do that is the mission. We'll do that through this. The values are, okay, here's who we are and our culture and our brand values. And then the pillars is the strategy. The pillars are the how-to. Well, okay, we're going to get there by improving our product portfolio. We're going to improve our customer range. We're going to find new customers. We're going to buy new companies. We're going to go into a new market geographically. We're going to go into a new market from a product point of view. You know, whatever it is, those are the pillars. They're the how-to. And then the KPIs is, how do we know that we're successful at this? And somewhere along the line, you come up with what are the capabilities we need in order to deliver this? What kind of behavior? What kind of leadership? What kind of technical know-how? And unless you get a good handle on what your needs are going to be, and remember what I said at the beginning, you need to be a little bit flexible with that because you don't know what's coming down the road. Some of the stuff about behavior especially need to be higher quality but more general. Some of the stuff around the technical elements can be much more tight. So as an example, our strategy is to go and buy some of the smaller companies and grow that way, you know, buy and get synergies from economies of scale. Okay, do you have the right people to be able to go and find these opportunities for you, to do the due diligence, to really check whether what they're saying in their accounts and in their official papers is accurate, to reduce your risk, to value the business? Do you then have somebody who knows how to make that deal, how to finance it? Do you then know how to close the deal and then how to build the synergies and deliver the value you promised? Has anyone done that in your company before? Okay, they haven't. Fine. Okay. How do we get that talent? See what I mean? So depending on the strategy that you want to go, that what does performance look like and what capability you need and what will you need in the future, which is the potential, is going to become clear, but it's got to drive down from the business. This is the Bain model of how you quantify capability and how you find the gap. So portfolio management is portfolio of your product and your financial model, mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, partnership. I'm not going to read through them all, but this is the management capability, operational capability, and proprietary USP for your business, your technology, your go-to-market, all the rest of it. What are the capabilities that you have already? What are the capabilities you lack in order to be able to achieve your objective? And here's a breakdown. I got this from Bain because we employed Bain to help us with our strategy development when I was in Ocean Coca-Cola, and this came from that particular time, and this is how we did it. So this was a live project, and you can see on the people and culture, you know, the leadership, the culture requirement, the talent pipeline, all of that, employee engagement is all part and parcel of that you would measure. And then you'd come up with a gap analysis. And here is a chart I made to describe it. It's not from any book. This is my own work. Strategy can be divided into your annual plan, because in the end, we're going to break it down into phases. You're not going to deliver a 5-year strategy on day one. What's we're going to do first? And by the way, recruiting capability well in advance as you're going to need it is wasteful of money, creates bored and demotivated talent that you brought in and not using, fills the organization with people who want to do something useful, so they create work for themselves, they create red tape. It's a dreadful thing when the organization clogs up, because this is the thing. People want to show value. People want to do things. When there's no need for them to do that yet, they create work. Oh, no, I'm a senior person. I need a team. Oh, no, and I need to do this. And by the way, and too many initiatives. Maybe you're not the priority initiatives that you need to have at the time. So, and this happens with the line managers all the time. Here's our business plan. Come up with your own personal plan. Okay, in my plan, in order to deliver it, I need these people and these resources. Every single one of them will say, okay, I need all those people to the full capability on day one. And you ask them, actually, do you really need them? When is that project really going to kick off? Do you really need them now or maybe in July? Do you need them full time, or is this going to be a temporary role? You know, is there going to be a finite time when this project's over? Can this job be done by somebody else who already has this capability and merge it with their role? Is this a full-time job? Maybe we do a part-time contract. Do we need to do this? Can we get another company to do this for us, who's better capable of doing it? So all of these questions are not questions that, in my experience, line managers automatically answer. Line managers will want full person under my control, day one, way before I need it, and to a capability more than I need, because that gives me security, that reduces my risk. And the role of someone like you, someone like me, is to ask the questions and refine it. What do you actually have at the moment? What capability? How do you know what capability you have? Maybe some of your people have skills that you don't know about. Maybe someone's done this, but they didn't put it on their CV. It's not part of their current job. Maybe they've got spare capacity and they could take this project on. Maybe this project would be great development for them and they would love to do it. Maybe they'll be resentful if you bring someone from outside to do it when they wanted to do it inside themselves. Have you checked those things? And do you really know you need it? Okay, fine. We've done all that. We now understand what the gaps are. Then you get to this decision. Do we buy it in? It's very expensive, very difficult. Can we optimize the roles? Can we design the role so it's broader, so that it's more fulfilling, more satisfying for the individual, but also cheaper? Can we grow this capability? Is it strategic? Is it going to be needed forever? That's when you grow it. And is there a company out there who does this better, cheaper, and is their core activity, so they're the deep experts? That's the decision tree. And this is a decision tree that a strategic advisor makes. Most line managers, as I said, don't do this. Stop me if there's any questions or anything, okay? Because most companies will have an integrated talent plan for delivering a lot of these things. And it looks like this. This is an example. You know, here's the business needs. The business needs become critical capability requirements for the future. You develop them into roles, and then you do a talent review. What do we have? Where's our shortage? Do we hire? Do we optimize? Whatever. And then you got the strategy for the activities that deliver that gap. And of course, part of that is engaging them, redeploying them, but also retaining them. And the results are measured through cost, business outcome, and the KPIs that were for that particular project. It's a very logical process, but like everything else that we're ever going to talk about, the skill of how you do it is the key to success, not what you do. You can find these kinds of templates all over the internet. There's no magic in it. But the insight and how you make it work, the experiential element, that's the key. And there's an awful lot of paperwork and processes and lots of different things to consider. You know, what do the stakeholders think? What's the internal perspective? What customer impact is this going to have? How will it create innovation? Before you look at the people strategy for talent inside, about talent acquisition, talent management, talent development, talent retention. Is affected by all of those things. You need a very holistic view of the context in which you're operating. This is an example of what I did for a company. I took the names out and the details out to protect the innocent, but you can see, you know, this is our mission, this is our approach, this is our actions, and this is the measures. By the way, most of these slides have too much in them, but I've left them in there as notes for you, almost like articles. In bullet point, so that you've got more information than maybe you need in a lecture, you know, or as a reference document almost. So normally I wouldn't have so much data on these slides, but I think it's useful for you to have it in case you need it. I have no problem with anyone copying, using these if in your company, in your job, or in the future, you're going to need to do something like this. And remember, talent development is a core function of a leader. So just by the sense of you being leaders, you need to be skilled in developing talent that you're going to need to deliver your objectives. I would say, like any other process, you have a push for quality in how things get done. And that's around the quality of the data that you're using to challenge your assumptions. How do I know? Do I know the reality in an accurate enough form so that I'm not making the wrong judgment? Is my needs accurate? Is the data on who I have accurate? And then the pool. How do I know it's been successful? How do I know that the measures are the right measures for the effectiveness of what I intended? So the measures at the front are the pool for quality. And the information that goes into your approach is the push for quality, the push and the pull, and the actions of the process in the middle. Like any process, if you put rubbish in, rubbish will come out. But if what you come out is not important to people, is not what is key to them, they have no motivation to put the right quality in, or the right quality in the process of what happens. So, how many companies do you think are doing this right? It's obvious, isn't it? And almost all the big companies, they're going to need to do something like this. Otherwise, they're going to run out of people. They're not going to have the right people. They're not going to deliver the results that they're looking for. 100%, they're not going to. So, are they doing it right? I found this research. It's a little bit old, but I think it's still valid, by Burson Associates. So I thought I'd just share it with you. That they talk about levels of maturity in talent management. The first is not mature. They do it in silos. HR does its own thing, and is not interconnected. Level 1. Level 2 is it's standardized. This is how we do it, and there's several systems that are connected. With the recruitment system, I'll give you an example. The type of people recruiting, is that the same type of person we're promoting? What we say we look for in recruitment, is that what we measure people's performance against? Is it integrated in any way? Is it standardized? It's level 2. Level 3 is when you really put the focus on how the team responds to this talent initiative right across, and the individual and the company are aligned. And level 4 is when you've got a strategic talent management system that is clearly linked to the business needs and clearly delivering the results through the measures that you have in place. And it's end to end. And we talk about what we mean end to end. End to end means from recruitment right the way to someone leaving the organization. And the other end to end is from young people recruited as their first job into the company to CEOs. So you got these two different connections, whether hierarchical or whether the lifetime of the employee. Now, what proportion of companies do you think are at what level? How many are going to level 4? How many are level 1? I couldn't find the data for different countries. I only found the data for two companies, for US and for UK. So I do apologize. But they are indicative of how many companies are going up this level of maturation. So level 1, 28% of companies in US and 41% of companies in UK. 41% are only at level 1. And so on and so forth. You can see where we go with this. Only 4% of companies in UK have a fully strategic integrated talent management strategy. I'm shocked by that, actually. I don't know if you are. I really am. And only 7% of, because it seems to me like it's obvious, but then maybe that's because of my background. Large gaps in the level of maturity in US companies. And what are the benefits? What are the payoffs? Look at that. The rate of promotion from within, which is much safer, which most companies now say is one of the measures that they will have. I can't see any comments, actually. Oops, sorry. I went too far forward. Yeah. Guys, don't assume I can see the chat. So if you got any questions, please ask it, because I can't see the chat. I think it's somehow frozen again. It's not showing me the chat. So don't put anything in the chat. I'm not able to see it. I'm going to carry on, because otherwise it might freeze. Are you guys still there? You guys can still see the charts? Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just checking. So there's a lot of positives And look at the employee turnover. How much better it is when you've got a mature psychological deal. And we talk about this, the psychological deal for growth and for mutual win between your employees and the company is always generated with a more strategic talent management system. And you can see how performance is looked at in different levels of maturity. So there is a clear, hello, Andy, how you doing? He's joined us early. That's all right. We'll come to you in 15 minutes, mate. So, or as soon as I finish this set of slides. So the level of maturity is delivering value, is delivering performance value, is delivering all kinds of KPIs that we really, the business would benefit from, but it's not happening. Most companies are not at that level of maturity, and certainly not the level of maturity that Andy's company is in, that he's going to describe to us. And an awful lot of different metrics that I've found are showing the impact of that lack of maturity in managing talent, critical talent at the right level. I put this in here for your reference rather than, talk about each one of them individually. But there's a lot of different measures that are in here that talk about why it's a good thing. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to do two things. You're trying to improve your ability to achieve the company's performance objectives, but in a risk reduction way. So there's less risk of failing, not having the right people, not having the right capability, not in almost every company I worked in. For example, succession was in the high risk, high impact category. And a lot of companies are working towards reducing that particular risk, which we'll talk about in a moment. All right, let me stop here before we talk about these definitions, actually. Let me see if it will let me stop presenting. God, it's frozen again. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, I'm going to see if I can hand over to Andy to present to us. God, this thing's gone to sleep again. I'm sorry. I can't even exit. Help. This happens every time. We're doing really well and everything's going okay, and then suddenly it doesn't, it stops working or freezes. Let me call Elena.
It seems to be working now, Masood.
Is it? Well, mine, I'm seeing a white screen at the moment, mate. I'm not able to do anything. But if you guys can see it, then that's good. What are you seeing on the screen? Ah, your presentation. Is that?
Yep. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Oh, if you can, then we can carry on. So let me just welcome you, Andy. Thank you so much for yesterday, and thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us today. We really need to see things from a point of view of the organization that is investing in talent and investing in leadership talent and all the various different aspects there in real life. And your contribution in us being able to see that is really key to the success of this session and to this module. So thank you so much. Andy, why don't you introduce yourself and kick off, because I can't do anything at the moment from my end.
Absolutely. Thank you, Masood. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. As Masood said, my name's Andy Callahan. I'm the Head of Learning and Talent Development for Actian Group. And Actian is a marine energy and infrastructure services organization. What that means in reality is that our people do offshore surveys and subsea engineering, mainly in the renewable energy industry and also in the oil and gas sector, much more shifting our focus, as a lot of organizations are, to the renewables sector. We've got roughly 2,500 employees based across 15 countries. And our workforce is made up of hugely technically able people, really technically qualified people. The challenge for Actian and the opportunity when I joined 2 years ago was that we, like many companies, used to promote people based on that technical excellence and that technical performance. We're not the only company. In my time working as a consultant with many businesses, I'm sure a number of you, Masood as well, have all experienced where companies do this. They take their best salesperson, their best engineer, their best performer, and promote them into a people leadership role. Unfortunately, the competencies, the skills required to be a great people leader are very different for being a great engineer, a great salesperson, a great performer. And then what the organizations do is take that person, promote them into that leadership role with no support, no training, no development. And then in 12 months' time, they're surprised when that individual flames out. And in my experience, in most organizations, then exits the company. And what you've lost is a great performer, but also then the trust, the support of the team, who then think, actually, I don't want to be the next one to step forward. So it really is a case of if we can get this right, and the trick for Actian and the challenge is going to be, how do we marry that technical performance with some of the other development to ensure that we're developing a global leadership pipeline? And that's what the focus of the discussion is going to be about today. I think development, though, is 1/4 of the jigsaw in terms of an integrated approach to strategic talent management. You've got to find the right people, then develop the skills and competence to make them a great leader, then deploy them effectively and retain them successfully through engagement and through the right reward. If you get all 4 pieces of the jigsaw there, what you've got is the foundations for a good global leadership pipeline and that talent pipeline. And where we're going to focus our conversation today is around the development. I guess in some ways, the development of your leaders, your global talent, will in some ways be influenced and shaped by the organization's philosophy towards the talent market. Are you going to grow your own leaders organically, or are you going to go to market and buy them in? To misquote Shakespeare's Hamlet, to buy or not to buy, that is the question. The advantages and disadvantages are there for each approach and each methodology. Some of the advantages of developing your talent internally and growing your own organically is there's a lower hiring cost, at least at the first part, the recruitment cost is lower. These are people who know the organization, so therefore some of your onboarding risks are mitigated. And I think one of the keys is it develops greater loyalty because it shows your current staff a development pathway and opportunities for them to grow, to develop their career within your organization. The flip side of that is there are some benefits to bringing people in from external. They bring that external perspective, which creates a really valuable diversity of thinking in terms of your leadership population. Reading a great book at the moment by the former England rugby player, Will Greenwood, called World Class, and it looks at leadership. And he really talks a lot there about that diversity of thinking in leadership and management teams and how important that is. These are also people who've got a proven track record. If they haven't, why are you hiring them? Yeah. There's also no legacy issues in terms of things like the internal politics within the organization. These are people who start with a clean slate. And it also gives you an immediate answer and ability to address any glaring succession gaps within your organization's plans. I think one of the other advantages for external talent is that it gives you the opportunity to bring in superstars, people who will set the pace, set the bar at a high level. That's the reason that soccer teams will spend hundreds of millions of euros on a Kylian Mbappe, on a Cristiano Ronaldo, on a Lionel Messi. They're people who will set the bar. Now, within Action, our approach is actually going to be to take the internal route. We've decided and declared that by the end of 2023, 70% of all leadership appointments within our business will be internal hires. And the reason that the chief executive and I have done that is because 2 years ago, when we started this journey, when we were at that very talent development immature phase that Masood was talking about, we probably had 70% of our hires were external management hires. So as a result, we've said to make a real statement of what our business is about and the opportunity for everyone to develop, to grow, to improve within our business, we're going to flip that completely on its head and say 70% of people, management appointments within our business will be organic internal hires. That 30% still leaves us the opportunity, the external, to bring in those superstars, those pace setters, the people that set the bar. Having said that, I think with their new ownership this week, probably Newcastle United are going to be able to afford Kylian Mbappe quicker than Action can. So how are we going to go about developing that 70% of leaders? Well, in our organization, the journey that we've taken, and we're by no means at the end result of that journey, it is still a pathway that is being built and underway. But certainly what we've changed is that now talent management isn't just a twice-a-year thing. We don't get everyone together at the start of the year and mid-year, do the talent reviews and the 9-box grids and all that great stuff, and then put it away in a drawer for the next 6 months. And in 6 months' time, pull it out, go, what is it we said we were going to do again? Oh, shoot. Yeah, we meant to do that, didn't we? That's not the way we do things anymore. Our talent management is an ongoing, consistently ongoing process. And what that means is that managers and team members are having frequent daily, weekly, monthly coaching conversations that are looking at someone's performance, at someone's career opportunities, at what their development needs are and how we can fulfill those in a multitude of different ways, not just training. You know, development happens in all sorts of ways. You know, we're looking very much at that 70-20-10 model where 70% is on the job learning. You know, I think a lot of people think of training and development only happens when there's a big pink neon flashing sign above their head saying training, 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 or they're on a course. Actually, people develop in a whole host of different ways. And part of those coaching conversations is really looking at that. And the other bit that managers are talking to their teams openly and honestly about is potential, and therefore the career opportunities to move into that leadership pipeline. The way we do this is through identifying 5 indicators that we feel really demonstrate global leadership talent and what those look like. The first one is performance. I think great talented people deliver, and they deliver more than is expected. So for us, to really be considered talent, ideally people would be exceeding the expectations in what they're required to deliver. We might consider people who meet expectations, but only if they've got what we see as exceptional turn potential that I'll talk about in a moment. But certainly, ideally, we're looking for people who exceed expectations. Global mobility. We want our talent to be globally mobile, who can move around the globe and move into different opportunities. Now, I think we've all shown over the last 19, 20 months that global geography isn't as big a barrier to being effective as it once was. So this has maybe moved down our scale over the last 20 months as people have been effective on things like Zoom, as we're all doing today, that can make the world smaller. But for certain operations, we've just appointed an engineering leader in our Singapore business and organization. And for her to take that role, she needed to be in Singapore because it really is about being boots on the ground with the team and working with them in that location. So for certain roles, we are still saying that is key, but it's maybe not as big a deal breaker as it once was maybe 2 years ago. Career stage is one that we use as a metric and a data point rather than actually something that influences our decisions. Because what we're saying there is that having that information helps us look at what is the development that someone will require and need. Someone who's at an entrant level or an early career level may need very different development and support to someone who's in their mid-career or late career. So it's more about us being able to adapt our development support for someone who's moving into that pipeline. It also enables us to tailor our timeframes when we're looking at the runway that someone's got left in their career. If we're talking about the timeframes being that someone will be ready in 5 to 8 years for that senior leadership role, and he turns around to us and says, well, actually in 3 years, I intend to be on the golf course working on my handicap because I've retired, then we need to tailor our thinking and think, do we accelerate this? What's the plan and how do we adapt that plan? Behaviors, for me, this is one of the non-negotiables. We have 6 core values within our business. And for people to be leaders and talent within our business, if we're thinking of them as being people who are moving through into those really senior leadership roles, for me, they've always got to demonstrate our values, to live and breathe them and engage them, and to weave them into what they do on a day-to-day basis. If the performance is the what, the behaviors are the how. And I think, that is a really key one for us and those 6 core values. The biggest one in terms of actually identifying who that pipeline of leadership talent are and what we're going to do to develop them is then this turn potential. And what we're looking for is people who can turn through at least 1 role level in the next 3 to 5 years, but ideally 2. Now, we're not saying there it necessarily has to be hierarchically in the next rung up the totem pole in terms of that growth. It could be that they're taking a broader role, more exposure, greater breadth, but we are looking for at least 1 role change and for them to be really seen as group global leadership talent, ideally 2 levels, 2 roles within the next 3 to 5 years. What all of that does when pulling it together is enables us to put together for each person a very quick pen portrait. And what this allows us to do is at a board level, actually be able to review everyone really quickly and talk about this on a regular basis. Our leadership team are talking about these people at least every fortnight. Now, they might not talk about all the people on the 9-box grid, and especially in that top right-hand corner every fortnight, but they will be looking at a number of these people, and on a regular basis, the discussions are taking place. And what it gives us as a snapshot is across the bottom, those 5 indicators that we've talked about. Also, what are someone's key strengths and where are some of their development needs? Also looking at maybe the next long-term moves and what are the big moves for them, both immediate and medium-term future. And then up in the top right-hand corner, we're pinpointing what are we actually going to do about this person's development in the next 12 months? And the decision is around, do we promote? Are we developing them towards that next role? Is there some sort of stretch assignment that will help them grow and build their skill set? Or actually, do we feel they may be topped out as to where they are at the moment? And we want to say, actually, for a time being, we develop them in the role. Or is it that we reassign? Are they maybe beyond their growth limit at the moment, or actually is the role not right for them? So the decision there, and that's what we're holding our leaders' feet to the flames for in terms of in regular discussions. Okay, what does that look like? What have you done? Where's the support that they need to achieve this? So it's really going back to leaders and holding them accountable for the development of their talent within their business, but also our global talent. I think traditionally, career development has often looked like this in organizations, or historically, and certainly through the 20th century, this was the approach organizations took. People started at the bottom of the ladder and they climbed up that rung in their silo or their career or function until they hit their limit on that ladder or until they reached the top. Realistically, though, and what happens in real life looks nothing like this. In real life, I think career development looks something like this. People have crashes, people have setbacks. Also in terms of the way that people will move laterally or diagonally through an organization. It isn't just about people moving up the ladder. Sometimes they'll take the ladder and put it against a completely different wall. And that's all part of actually development in reality. So if we're looking to develop leaders effectively and develop our talent pipeline successfully, I think as an organization, what we really need to do is to adapt our approach and take account of this reality rather than that theory and the historical approach of people developing in a more linear fashion. So as a result, we're looking at our leadership development, our talent development, and saying, how do we adapt that to provide people with these different opportunities and different ways that the ladder can move rather than climbing rung by rung? I think what that ties in with as well is there's a change in people's perception, and certainly maybe some of our early career talent and our talent coming through the business, our emerging talent. People are no longer motivated by the big salary in the corner office. Yes, it's nice, but it's not the only thing that sets someone apart in their career. I think what a lot more people are looking for is what Daniel Pink described in his book Drive as these three factors: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is having the opportunity, the ability to shape, to scope your work, the way you do it and when you do it. Mastery is about being able to see yourself progress and get better, and being in an environment that encourages and supports that. And then purpose is about having a meaning to your work, doing something bigger. And that's really where your organization's mission, vision, and values become important. If you take, for example, people that work for Disney, that work for Netflix, that work for Apple, yes, they're very well rewarded for what they do, but that's not the reason they do it. The reason they do it is because they love it. They absolutely love what they're doing. And I think, to really engage developing leaders and to tap into that motivation that helps us attract, develop, deploy, and retain great talent, I personally believe that we really need to be focusing in on these three areas more than maybe some of the traditional HR approaches of training and reward. I think an organization that does this really well in our sector, they're actually one of Action's clients, is Shell. And their CHRO, their HR officer, a few years ago now, but made a speech that I think was really impactful. And he talked about the fact that the key to individual development is on-the-job training that I mentioned earlier, that people learn while they're on the job and doing. And what they want to do is give people the opportunities to gain critical experience. And I think that's the really key phrase there. It's that opportunities and projects that give them that critical experience. And what Shell do is look at what they call development critical roles. And these are posts or experience that emerging leaders must have pivoted through at some point in their career to get into that top tier and the senior roles. And then giving people the opportunity to actually get that experience, do those roles. I know Masood introduced something very similar when he was working for Nationwide with the branch manager program, and in terms of how they then swapped branch managers across regions to get that breadth of talent and develop people and move them through the organization. Shell do that really well as well. And they look at a blend. They want that mix of head office and field roles, operational and strategic experience, and evidence of people being stretched and challenged at each step, taken out of their comfort zone. And in some ways, a little bit of a stress test, because along this road of global leadership development and talent development, there will be points where people say, you know what, actually, it's not for me. And that's perfectly okay. What we want to do is develop those really key people, our high performing talent, and give them the opportunities to grow, but also support our people who are saying, you know what, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I think it was Jack Welch referred to it as A players, B players, and C players. Your A players are your absolute talent, your stars that are growing through the organization. Your B players are the ones who are doing a good job, solid, steady eddies, the really great, solid performers. They're the bedrock of organizational success and performance. You don't want to lose your B players. And actually, you don't want everyone to be A players and high performing talents, because they take a lot of managing and a lot of support. Likewise, you then need to do something to address what's happening with your C players. And in terms of the way we used to tackle this when I worked at British Gas, or when I worked for Zurich, was we called it MUMO. And that was move up or manage out. And we would support people to move up in their performance into B player category or beyond. But there comes a point where if people aren't going to move, it becomes a very different HR focused conversation. But what we're focusing on, and where the approach we're taking at Actian, is similar to the approach that Shell have taken, where we're looking at what can we do that gives people that breadth of experience to prepare them for these senior leadership roles, so that actually when they move into their next leadership role, or potentially their first leadership role, some of those core skills, some of those leadership capabilities have almost been woven into their DNA before they get there. And they're therefore set up for success. And at the same time, we've stretched them, we've challenged them at each point. So when I'm working with organizations, when I'm talking to individuals like yourselves, I would always say, think about the roles. And when you're in this sort of looking at talent development and leadership development, what are those development critical roles within the organization that would provide future leaders with the skills, the knowledge, experience, and competence to succeed at those senior levels? And I think in some ways, talent management and leadership development, I would say in closing, is a little bit like alchemy. But instead of taking base elements and trying to turn them into gold, what we're doing is taking raw potential and trying to turn that through the development opportunities, through the experience, through the knowledge, through the exposure to senior people, and turn that raw potential into leadership performance. And I think if you do that, you've got a great opportunity to benefit not just individuals in the business, but also the business overall. So that was a very rapid, quick fire run through of what we're doing at Actian. So thank you for the time to be able to share that. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Andy. That was brilliant. Really insightful. Really appreciate that. Questions, team?
I've stunned everyone into silence.
I've got a question for you. What about people's reluctance to share talent or to play a team win game amongst the senior players?
Great question. And it's something that I think happens in all organizations where talent hoarding takes place. And there's a reluctance and a concern. Certainly when we kicked off this process 2 years ago, some of our senior leaders were saying, well, hang on a minute, you know, you're doing this on the 15th. Does that mean on the 16th, my key players are going to be plucked from business critical projects and moved into this talent pool and things like that? And I said, no, what it means is that it enables us to have a grown up, meaningful conversation that then looks at what's this individual's career aspirations, what does the business need, and what does the organization as a whole need? And I think what you're looking for in that triangle of individual, local business, organization is the sweet spot that hits all three. And sometimes that dot will move, but you're looking for something like that. I think one of the challenges, legacy for us, was that as a business, we had historically grown through acquisition and merger. And Actian had almost been an umbrella holding company in essence. And we had 23 different businesses and brands that had pretty much been running their own organization and left to their own devices. And what we were doing was bringing that much more into a joined up approach. And that's been a whole transformation for the business over the last 2 years. So a huge change management project and work. And part of that has been that actually that's then we've got people, instead of I work for some of our brands, Claxton, Intermore, LDD, I work for Actian in Claxton, Intermore, LDD. So people are starting to see it now that they work for this wider organization. And what that means is there are we've actually shown people how it opens up opportunities for them.
Mm.
Actually, there might be a point where I top out, or there's not a development option left for me in this strand, but there is in this strand. One organisation that I know were very good at doing this in the UK were the Whitbread Group.
Yes.
When they owned
That's
the Whitbread pubs and restaurants, they owned the Costa Coffee brand. They also owned the David Lloyd fitness chain. And when they owned those 3 brands, some of them were franchises, but when they owned those 3 brands, you could zig and zag people. They were very good at zigging and zagging people through different roles in the organization to give them that opportunity. And what Shell are good at doing as well, I guess, and that was something I forgot to mention, is where people are sat in one of those roles and blocking, they will actually, if that's blocking the pathway of an emerging leader, they will move them into a different role, a different project to give that person the opportunity. And we're starting to do that. So we are getting that culture now, and it's taken 2 years for that culture of getting people to think, actually, I've got to play nicely with the other children in the sandpit, and I've got to share my toys. In this case, it's sharing resources, sharing talent. So it has taken a bit of time because people were very reticent and very concerned about, well, actually, that has a knock-on effect on my project. But if we're moving this talent round, we actually get a chance for everyone to get better. And I know, Masood, when you were doing this with Nationwide, you talked about the fact that actually if you swapped 2 high-performing branch managers over, actually the performance in both branches got even better because they were bringing in new ideas, new thoughts.
That's right. I mean, Nationwide, I mean, we often talk, Andy, in this forum about context. And Nationwide, since everybody was there, if I may say, man and boy, women, you know, girl and ladies, through their career, people felt they had a skin in the game in that environment for their entire employee life cycle. In a company like Vodafone, for example, the Italians, as an example, created a work of fiction on their career reviews and succession plan for, and almost none of the talent they wanted came over until there was a Italian group CEO who then knew the inside and brought them over. And as for Shell, for example, the HR director of Vodafone was the ex-group HR director of Shell, who's now currently the group HR director of Pepsi, Roland. And I mean, I developed the talent across all those countries there for at least 10 years. And it was under his watch that almost all of them left. So what can I tell you? There's you know, it's very difficult. And I absolutely understand what you say about companies that have grown through acquisition, and also geographically being this, you know, so far away from each other. Because the other challenge that I'd like you to comment on is, when I used to bring the CEOs in from all these different places, one of the reasons that I was always asked to be the one who facilitated, irrespective of what job I was in, was that by the nature of my personality, I knew most of the board members in most of the companies, whereas nobody else did. And when Stannis from New Zealand would come to present, nobody knew whose talent were. You had to trust him 100%, and he could be pushing some of his poor performers to another place and would not be sharing, and nobody would know the difference. That's the thing. And there was a lot of that kind of need for a central team to have visibility, to be able to mitigate, but also to set the right standards so that what potential looks like in one country is the same. Anyway, it was an interesting situation to be in.
I think you touched on a couple of really interesting points there, Masood. I think it's definitely that we need to be comparing apples with apples and oranges with oranges. So we've got a clearly defined set standard of what talent and what leadership excellence looks like within the business. Some of that is what we need to be aiming to and almost using as our true north on the compass. Others need to be, what are the non-negotiable standards that we're working to now? I think the other bit is about making sure that senior execs especially really know the people within the business. And I've actually, as part of this talent review, set a challenge for our senior execs with a small prize that I've laid on, a bottle of something expensive. And it's almost a game of bingo that I've set up with them. They actually who can be the first one who's sat down and had a coffee with, out of our sort of leadership talent pool of, we're talking about, you know, within a company of 2,500 people, we've got about 120 people that we're looking at as really focused talent, and within that 50 that we're saying are our sort of best bets. And that's all potential really is, a best bet, because, you know, we all know of people who've had great talent, great potential, and not fulfilled it, you know, whether that's in the business world, the sporting world, everything like that. So I've got a challenge with them. Of that 50, who can be the first one in the senior exec team over the next 12 months who sat down and had a coffee and a chat, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, with each and every one of those 50 people. And there's, as I say, a significant investment I put up from my own pocket in terms of a bottle of something that they would enjoy. And that's a way of saying to them, who can be the first one that shouts bingo and can show me that they've had that discussion, because that will then mean they know their people. At a local level, I think it's turning that the other way up as well, inverting the pyramid and saying local managers have really got to invest in knowing their people well, understanding what are their career aspirations, where are their strengths that we can build on and play to, the Marcus Buckingham approach of, you know, play to your strengths, or where are some of those development needs, what are the ones that are going to be potential career stallers that we need to file off the edges.
A couple of things that I used to do, which I mean, maybe take this offline if you like, that worked really well, was group projects, global projects to showcase their talent. And the second thing is that the CEOs that contributed the best global talent to other functions, getting prizes and getting recognition for that, and getting you know, a return talent at some point that was even more you know, for mature and complete, you know, all kinds of benefits. Anyway, we can talk about this forever. It's my passion, as is yours, and I don't want to take all the time. Any other questions, team? Anybody else wants to contribute something or even challenge it? Please go ahead. No? I can't, remember, I can't see the chat because my whole system is hung. So if you're going to say something, please don't put it in the chat. Say out loud. Otherwise, we won't be able to know that you had a question or a challenge.
There's nothing come into the chat at the moment, Masood.
No, in that case, look, Andy, it just remains to thank you again for a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And, you know, we'll get together soon, hopefully.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and thank you all for your time, your engagement with this today. Please do, if anyone wants to share comments, thoughts, then I am on LinkedIn. I'm not on there regularly, but please do add me on there. And likewise, if there's any opportunity to come back and speak to you all again about that, I'd love to invite myself back and join you with this. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thanks, and take care.
See you soon, mate. Take it easy. Bye-bye, mate.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Okay, gang. Now, my system is hung. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit and come back in. So if you need to take a break, you know, coffee time, break, you know, for bathroom, whatever, make a phone call. Give me 5-10 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay.
Because at the moment, I can't actually see the screen. I can only see my own cover page. I can see the dialogue coming through the bottom, but I don't know how to then start projecting the slides again. So just bear with me. I'll try and fix this and come back to you. Okay? Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
All right, I think I'm back. All right, don't worry, take a few more minutes, but I think I'm back. Good stuff. Let's get back to the slides. Where are the slides? What? Okay. Can everyone see the slides again?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. If everyone's okay, I want to sort of just carry on now. Look, what Andy presented is exactly what I used to present in various different jobs that I did. It's a very comprehensive, intended approach, but there is all kinds of risks in the way that we talked about it. You know, the quality of the data going in, the results coming out. It's a very imperfect situation. And I want to sort of make sure that you are aware of the real life. It doesn't always work like that. The technology, the technical element works like that, but not necessarily the end outcome. So let's talk about what we are looking at here when we come to talk about talent, for example. There are three definitions here on the slide that I'm presenting. Hopefully you can see it. The first is current applied capability. This is things that you can check. People have this capability. They have proven it. We have seen it. We know they have it. There's current potential capability, which is this person can do this right now, but we haven't seen it. They haven't needed to use it. We didn't know they had it. We didn't know this was part of their aspirations, that they wanted to use it, whatever. But, you know, we can get this capability right now. It's what I used to call stretch capability. It's capability we have now. We can make better use of it. And then future potential capability. This is capability we 100% don't have now, but we know we can get this because we have people who have potential. Now, potential is not proven, is not sure. It's a guess, exactly like we said about recruitment. We think that this person or this group of people can acquire this capability faster than a normal person or a normal team. We think they're open to it. We think they have potential for it. It's either getting more capability that is deeper, better skill, or wider, new capability. So, for example, we can say Masood Golshani speaks 2 or 3 languages. So we think he has potential to learn another language. In a more, if you like, draconian sense, you have 2 people who can't swim. You throw both of them into deep water, and the one who drowned didn't have the potential. But the one who struggled and drank a lot of water and suffered, but actually in the end floated and didn't die, they had potential. Yeah, you with me? So when you want to talk about leadership development, talent development, you're often talking about potential. Andy talked about that as well. Now, the confusion happens all the time because people mistake performance for potential. Remember what we said before about the top technical people who were really good at their jobs being promoted into positions of leadership, and you have what was a really valuable technical person become a really destructive and terrible leader or even people manager. You take a positive and you turn it to a negative. It happens all the time because of this mistake between performance and potential. Performance is job specific. Now it's very clear that you could see it, you could measure it. Potential is about guesswork. You're saying, you know, can they do a variety of different roles? Can they go up the ladder? Is their behavior in a way seen as somebody who is the kind of person we want to be leading us in the future in line with our culture? And performance can go up and down, but perception of potential also goes up and down. You get a lot of people who get put onto the high potential list, as we call it, and a few years later, you realize, no, you were mistaken. Or you get people who you thought, no, they're just good at doing their own jobs, who surprise you, who are capable of doing something very different that maybe even they themselves didn't know. I've come across an awful lot of situations where people who were seen as basically the workhorses, the average person, did extraordinary things. And the person you brought in that was supposed to be the hero, that was going to save the company and save the business and do all kinds of things, definitely didn't perform for all the reasons that we said. So you've got to have a watching brief. This is a moving thing. Often the problem is, especially when you tell people, they get a label on their head, I'm high potential, I'm a successor, I'm going to future CEO. They become arrogant, they become, and they derail themselves. And we talk about that in a minute. Or the other people see that and resent them and behave towards them differently, and therefore the situation changes. These are moving feasts, but we need to be very clear about what we're talking about. Performance is now, potential is future. Now performance, they can do this. We know they can do it, we can test it, and this is current capability or stretch capability. Potential is the capability they don't have, but we can make it. So how do you make the right guess? How do you know that somebody is worth banking on? You will see, and Andy talked about this damn 9-box grid, this is used everywhere. Have any of you seen this before? Anyone seen this before?
No.
No? Okay. You will. This is the most commonly used tool for putting people in boxes. And as I said, putting people in boxes is really dangerous. One axis along the bottom, the horizontal one, is their performance now. Good performance, exceed performance, or bad performance, poor performance. The y-axis, the right-hand side, is what we think their potential is. Now, remember, some companies will say high means we can see them going 2 levels higher than their current job. So they do it by level. Some other people do it through behavior. We say, no, with the behavior we've seen shows that this is a long-term person that they can go. Because let's be blunt here, all human beings are learning entities. So an average person, if they've been doing something and have been watching how other things are done, over time will learn and grow. And they will learn and grow at a normal rate. So for somebody can get promoted to do the boss's job because they've learned how to do it over a long time, and they naturally grew into it. They used to call it dead man's shoes. They wait for the boss to retire or leave or whatever, and they automatically are the people who are given that job. And that person may have no potential beyond that. So an average person, like the people in the middle that we call in backbone here, they get promoted. The professionals get promoted, but they're different to the top. Where this model came from was from investment in shares. There was a company called the Boston Consulting Group. Have any of you come across them? Along with McKinsey, Bain, and Booz, they're one of the best and known global strategy consultancies. And many decades ago, Boston came up and said, look, because you can't predict the performance of equity, of shares, in order for you to be successful, you need to have a portfolio. And you need to be able to put where you're going to put your investment in the right way by guessing how fast they're going to grow and how risky they are. And it was called the Boston model, which is what this is. And they said, okay, the investments you've made that were poor investments that are producing poor results now, and we think they'll provide poor results in the future, we call them dogs. And this is what we call in poor fit to the company. The ones in the middle, the backbone, we call them cash cows. They will provide you with income, but at the market rate, normal. And then at the top, they had these things called the stars and the rising stars. And these are, the stars are the ones who are producing results now, and we think in the future. And the rising stars are not producing the results now, but we think they will in the future. if you were to put the right amount of mix of different investments, and they said that the perfect is about 28 different items to spread your risk into the Boston model of how to invest, you will get the optimum model with the optimum risk. All right, so that was the idea. Somebody came along and said, you know what, these people that we are trying to spend money on, that's investment. We're investing in those people. Why don't we use the Boston model to make sure that investment is right? So they applied the model that was designed for buying shares and equity to people, because human capital is our emotional equity, is what we have in the organization that we say is one of our assets. Therefore, why don't we apply it? And the idea was that you can't do everything for everyone. We only have a finite resource to help develop people. For the senior people who are really developing the top global leadership and whatever, that's easy because they're adding value now and we get the immediate return on the investment we make. If I send someone to a program, they come and they're in a job where they could immediately apply that learning and immediately give us the benefit. So it's the top right-hand corner, easy equation. We do everything that we can because we'll get our money back very quickly. For the high potentials in the red box, we will invest in them because we think longer term, they will bring back the results because they'll become our successors. But actually in the short term, we don't expect immediate return. With the senior specialists, no, we'll get immediate return, but they are not going to bring us huge long-term value. So we maybe should invest in short-term technical capability they could use right now. No point investing in them for long-term because they don't have the long-term value. And the people at the yellow, these are people we're going to exit, we're not going to invest in them. But what you find is that huge bubble in the middle. Everyone else, the people who just do a normal job. Now, most companies are focused in their talent strategy and leadership development strategy on the top 5–10%. Same as Andy was talking about. The future successes, the ones who need a move, the ones we want to retain, the ones that are our future, Now, if you're investing in those guys, there's a logic issue. If you were to improve the 5% of your people capability by 5%, how much value are you getting? But if you were to improve the 95% of your people by just 1%, how much value are you getting? If you were a leadership development, people development team, do you put more emphasis in making more learning and development and capability available for everyone? Or do you put all your time, effort, and investment in making the top 5% as successful as you can? I'm here to tell you that you mustn't forget the top 5–10%. They're important. Absolutely. They're the future CEOs, future leaders. But the investment return is much, much higher in making the whole organization an improving, engaged, and learning organization, rather than just putting your focus in the 5% at the top. And this is where most companies go wrong. Because for all you know, there could be an awful lot of potential that you've missed in this middle bunch anyway. Right? But you're missing it out. You're missing out. So this is what's going on with most strategies, and that is where things go wrong. You're creating an investment model where you put in the focus on the top management as number one. They can go to Harvard, they can go to expensive courses, conferences, whatever. Then the high potentials, then the senior, technical people, and then everyone else. And I'm saying to you, this is not necessarily the best strategy. That remember how we said that for leadership, sometimes it's best to have an inverted pyramid where the leaders actually support the front line that deliver to the customer, deliver your brand promise and your products. How is that different here? Shouldn't we be putting focus on more money, more resources on improving everyone's development? Things that everyone has access to? And yes, then invest some time and effort on the top people and on the high potential and the technical people. But instead of putting the majority of our time, majority of our investment against them, put the majority against the development of the majority of your people. This is not the kind of thinking that happens. Do you guys have got any views about this? What do you think? Focus on the top, focus on the bottom, because you got finite time and resources. Any opinions?
I think maybe we need to focus on the top.
Okay, yeah, we do need to, but my point is, how much of an time and effort and budget do you put on the top? How much of the time and budget, which is finite, right? You've only got a certain amount of time, so do you put on improving the lot for everyone?
It's quite hard to, because I have no that actually experience to, experience to it.
Yeah, can I ask you this? Would it matter what the business context is? So if your business is delivered through a system that is driven by the majority of your people, that's one context. If no, the results are delivered by very few key people, that's a different context, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that drives that decision. If you are a consultancy and the top consultants are where all your profits coming through, it makes sense for you to invest on that. But if you are a mass market company where your business is driven through your whole people being better than your competition, then maybe that's a different context, right?
Yes, just like increase the whole power of the companies.
There you go. There you go. So that's what I'm trying to get across. It's not automatic. There is a context to this. Yeah, I think you've got it on absolutely right. If the long-term value is being driven by those very few people,
yes,
go for it. That's where you put. But nevertheless, whatever you do is not an either or. You have to do both. It's a question of what's the balance? How much money, how much time do I put in this? How much money I put on that? What I'm saying to you is most companies are not getting the balance right. Most companies who have a mass market are still putting all their money and time into the 5%. And the 95% are not getting their share that will bring the really multiplier value.
Yeah,
that's the point.
That's quite a lot of companies' problem, I think. They just focus on the, the fight.
I mean, the 5% are fun, it's different, they're the stars, we want to keep them. Everybody else in my competition is trying to hire them and steal them from us. We need to retain them, blah, 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 blah. I get that, that's true. But the average salesperson, the average operator, the average customer service person, the average technical person working in your company is driving your value proposition for your customer and for your market.
Yes.
The top, right. So there's the, that's the equation I'm saying on the investment model. And because in the end, we said this about leadership. You get a great leader. This was the whole concept in historical times of great kings, the good king. There's no guarantee that their son or their daughter is going to become as good a king or as good a leader as they were. Succession is key. Succession is the lifeblood. Succession is a risk you want to mitigate. So you use the 9-box grid to reduce the risk for this. Now, the truth is, this also gets abused. Lots of names go into this, which are the favorites of that particular boss who nominated them and pushed it through, or a particular director has more influence, more power, so their people get on this list more than a quieter leader. Maybe some people's performance is easier to measure, easier to see, more visible. They get onto this. So when the time comes, you find there's lists of names in here, none of them get the job. Or they get the job and they fail. This is still a risk reduction strategy. It's still the best thing we have. But like everything else, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, rubbish in, rubbish out. check the assumptions, check the quality and consistency of the data to justify who these people should be, and then make sure that those people are used, putting the learning and development and the investment behind them, and then not putting them into these jobs means you're not getting the return for the investment that you've made. Now, I've got these categories here. These categories are the most often used categories. You got the emergency people who are not permanent successes, but they're the ones that cover if someone's off sick, if someone's got a personal issue, they can't come to work, or if there's a gap in the short term while you recruit someone or while you make someone ready to take a job. Then you got people who are ready now, within the next 12 months. And the next category is either 36 or 24 months or 49 months. Different companies have different length for the long term. You say, okay, these are people we're going to train. These are people we make visible. These are people we move job from job to make sure that they're ready to fulfill these jobs going. Some of this potential is technical. Like this person is always going to be in the sales function. That's who they are. They'll become the sales director, but within sales. Some people are more general. The ones who are general are the ones you watch out for the CEO roles, because that's their general role. And those are the people that you move from function to function, which is very difficult, very difficult. Because imagine moving someone function to function where they don't have the functional expertise, but they have the grade and the status, which is above people who've got higher capability than they have. It's a big risk for people when you move them around like that. Big risk. But, you know, those are issues that you need to deal with. So remember I said some people define potential as an output. You know, this person can go 2 levels above where they are currently within a given period of time. You also have the input, which is what personal characteristics have this person has that makes me believe they have the potential to learn and acquire capability that is broader or get that faster than an average person. Therefore, it's worth investing in them because they're going to give us the returns surer and faster. Now, I came up with this when I was in Vodafone working with Hay Group. And we did a project where we went and looked at the definition of potential for all these major companies around the world, all the major brands, and they're all available. You can find them. And I found out what were the common features that they all had. And then I became also aware of the works of this gentleman called Elliot Jakes, that then I went and got trained on his assessment methodology for finding these capabilities. What this theory, and actually this is what people are practicing, says, is that if you look for these qualities in people, those people are normally the individuals who've got the potential for growth faster than an average. The first one of those is what we call applied thinking. You could call it the helicopter effect. Somebody who can see the wood for the trees, someone who can see bigger picture, somebody who can see the complexity and make it simple for other people, somebody who's able to make judgment in a very clear, logical way, and then sees things in a broad way. I mean, for me, strategy is both long-term and broad. So that's applied thinking, I called it. But I mean, some people call it helicopter. Oddly enough, when I called it helicopter in Vodafone, some of my Japanese colleagues got very confused. So what do helicopters have to do with this? And it's a very British and American way of saying it. But so we changed that to applied thinking. The next one, which people are now talking about as being the primary one, is drive, is energy, passion. It's what they call grit. You know, persistence, resistance, tough skin, never looking back, always going forward, always improving, always taking on the challenge, taking personal risks. These are individuals who never defend. Defense, you know, excuses, passing blame, all of this wastes energy. I made a mistake. I'm a great person. I can take it on the chin. I can learn from it. Yes, I made a mistake. Here we go. Always moving forward. And you can look for that. You say, you know, what happened there? And they will tell you, I made a mistake. This happened. They don't make excuses. It's one of the key things I look for. But grit, you know, everything was against them. They didn't actually make it happen first time, but they kept going till they got there. Engagement. You can't do very much in this world now without taking people with you. There are very few things you can say, I'm going to do it by myself without anyone else, without my team, without my colleagues, without my boss, without my stakeholders, suppliers, customers, community, all these people. So how do you engage with them? How do you inspire them? How do they listen to you and you listen to them? And how do you create a win-win team orientation? Is absolutely key. And then the last thing is, this person learns fast. This person learns deeply. They are open to feedback. They apply that learning immediately. These are the 4 common factors in definition of potential for individuals. And I looked at the work of Elliot Jakes, as I mentioned to you before, and he has this chart that he's been following for decades and decades, looking at people in their 20s, how he assessed them against these characteristics, and then projected how high up the organization they would go. And he's got these 7 different levels they would go, which, by the way, to an extent also match the levels of leadership that we were talking about in session 2, when we talk about level 5. So when you're talking about level 7 over here, you're talking about someone who is dealing with issues at a philosophical level, at a spiritual level, is creating energy in the world, as opposed to somebody who's just managing their own immediate need themselves in mode 1. So this is the level of maturity of the leader that they're talking about, the potential to grow and how big an organization they could manage. So somebody who's managing a multinational giant, setting the tone, creating change in the world in the way Apple does, in the way Google does, in the way these companies do, they're dealing with that mode 7, mode 9, mode 10, etc. Okay, so here's a tool for you, and I want you to use this for yourself. Here are some questions you ask yourself to see what you have as a potential. Sorry. And this situation, these questions, you don't have to ever show them to anyone. This is a tool for you. But this is what I used to use when I was assessing potential. Either in a full assessment center, in everyday work, when you're asking people to nominate, you say, ask these questions from their boss. Do they do this? Do they do that? Ask for examples of these things. Show me an example of when this happened. How consistently is it happening? What kind of quality is it showing? And on the right-hand side is the derailers, because a lot of the overuse, as we said before, of some qualities become negatives. Confidence becomes arrogance. Seeing things in lots of different ways, because seeing things in black and white. There is a tool called by a gentleman called Hogan. It's called Hogan's Derailers. It's a personality questionnaire that you could use, that is often used now, very popular, to identify derailers. Because you can have some great people who can show you this potential, but if they've got the derailers, their risk is higher. Remember, potential is a way of reducing risk. And this derailment is happening all the time. People make a mistake, they burn out. We know that the senior appointments often don't deliver the value that we expected from them. Why is that? This person was successful elsewhere. Perhaps the derailers got in the way. Perhaps these are the things we should also measure, not just potential, but the derailers, which we now do in a fuller sense. You know, some of these people were nominated by bosses whose style fitted them. The context fitted them. The team they were with fitted them. The local geography fitted them. Maybe they've been promoted to the top level already. Maybe this was their limit. Maybe the weaknesses were hidden. All of these things are derailers that we need to watch out for. When you're trying to hire them, when you're trying to deal with them, often it's something in their core personality, to be very honest with you. Most of these things are very difficult to change. You could mitigate them. You could, have this person have within their team people who are very good at what they're weak at, or have a boss that actually can manage that derailer. but you need to be aware. You need to create awareness so that you can manage that risk. And these are the things we should all watch out for. Like we said at the beginning, success is a terrible, terrible thing in creating the derailers. Too much success too often is a negative in the growth of the person going forward. Okay, so let's take stock. We've talked about why development as an investment is essential for future growth of the business. We've talked about why talent is often left on the table and not used, and all the wrong assumptions that can happen. We've talked about how you develop that talent in an investment model, where you put your time, where you put your effort. We've talked about what potential looks like versus performance, and potential as either an output of how many levels they can move up, but potential in terms of the characteristics of the person that makes them a more successful, longer term, faster growing individual. And we've now talked about development. Let's move on to talk about the company. And what Andy talked about, the normal annual cycle for you to really evaluate within your company how you maximize the talent that you're going to need. We did the talent need. We know what our needs are, hopefully a little bit better than just guesswork. And we know what we have. So we need to make a plan to either buy, rent, optimize, or outsource, or grow the capability we need and with that talent. And it normally happens in this cycle. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. An average company spends about 4 months of the year analyzing performance in the past that's dead, business performance, making assumptions about the future, and then making plans that we call the budget. And the whole of the company is galvanized to fill those forms. And there's a process. You start by analyzing results and sharing the reality of what went well, what didn't go well, etc. What growth that you want to have, what expectation of the shareholders and the management is, etc. Marketing department takes that, says, okay, we need to buy this company, we need to grow this product. They pass it on to the sales team. The sales team says, okay, that will generate this kind of sales at this time period with that kind of revenue and this kind of cost. That will go to finance. Finance will check the revenue, check the margin, check the finance, come to HR and say, these are the people requirements that we're going to have. Bang, bang, bang. How many recruits, how much training and development, how many people moving jobs, how many people being exited, etc., etc. And then you have the plan. It takes 4 months. Within 3 months of the first period of the year, those plans are dead. How much time do you actually spend on the people side? Have a guess. How much time do you think? 4 months for the budget. How much time do you think an average company spends on the talent cycle? I mean, Andy said, it's no longer the 2 days that we had every year where we did it. How often then? How much do you think they do? Because time is a much better measure of actual priority than money. If it's especially not your money, you can say, okay, spend the money, spend the money. But actually, time you control. So how much time are they spending? Any guesses? I'd be astonished if they're spending more than a week, 5 to 7 days in a whole year, thinking about their people. But what they do is they get the line manager to nominate. Who needs to be a high potential? Who needs the extra investment? Who needs to be on the succession? Put them into the 9-box grid. Then you have some sense check. Let's calibrate. Are we have the same measure of quality? Do we have the same measure of potential? Do we believe that everybody's doing this game correctly? Do we trust each other? Okay, now let's put them through some kind of assessment, some kind of development center. Let's make them visible to other people. Let's just check, give them the label after we've checked. And now let's come up with a personal development plan for them. And then you execute the plan. You put them into succession, you move them jobs, you give them the training and development. This is a cycle. This is what HR offer managers right the way through. And the line managers don't normally take ownership, which frankly they should. And there is an awful lot of paperwork, an awful lot of different contexts. All of these things need to be managed. You get the input from the 9-box grid, the confirmation of it, the confidential notes, what kind of work they need, what their weaknesses are, what kind of, and then you develop the development plan, then you put it in, then you execute it, and then you track the difference. There is a lot of industry. There's a lot of technology that goes around this. The big companies have huge systems that generate this. There's a whole element, an integrated system. Success factors from Sage is the #1 in the world right now, but there used to be Peterborough Software, there used to be Percom, there used to be all kinds of Oracle-based systems. There's a huge amount of IT technology that generates all of this. I'm not even going to go into psychometrics development or assessment centers, job design for these individuals, the creating jobs that specifically for individuals, annual 360 feedback. Huge amount of things. Because in the end, you need to make sure that you got the right people at the right level. And it means not just breadth of the quality, but also at what level are these people? Do you have the right raw material coming in at the base with young people joining the company, their first recruits? But how much of that recruitment you're bringing in, you're recruiting because they have potential, not because you need them. When they've become middle managers, when they've become people managers, what happens then? And then how do you make sure that those people are ready for the ultimate senior executive positions, vice president positions, CEO positions? There's a whole pipeline to manage, and that cannot be all managed centrally by HR. Local people do the local recruiting often, especially country by country. In a global sense, they're all recruiting within their culture, within their system, especially if you've acquired those companies through acquisition. They're doing it their own way. And what they're doing that you could control is the hard stuff. You can control the templates because you're mandating them. You can control the systems they're using, the structures, role titles, grades. And often what goes wrong, where most people are not getting the right talent strategy and not getting the return, is you haven't created the right culture where it's important to develop people, where it's built into the role of the line managers. You haven't identified the right skill and capability you're going to need for the future. You're lagging behind. You haven't identified the right people with potential. You've identified people that you're comfortable with. Most of what goes wrong, as always, is the yin, not the yang. They call it softer, but this is the hard stuff. The hard stuff is the how. Most line managers call it, okay, let me do the soft things. If it was so soft, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you giving honest feedback? Why aren't you getting rid of poor performance properly? Because it's hard, not because it's easy and soft. They call it soft because it's not technology and hard tables and material, and it's people. So people are seen as soft, but people are not the soft issue. People are the difficult things for leaders to do, and it's what goes wrong. And it's also a transitory thing. I designed this many years ago to look at people in the life cycle, because again, you're talking about a human being. That human being's needs change at different stages in their career with you, and at different stages in their lifetime. Often when you're young, you don't have a family, maybe you don't have a partner, it might be easier to move them globally. They might be more mobile. They might be able to take more risks. Later on, when they have maybe children that are in school, they've got dependencies, maybe their partner, their husband or wife have their own job, their own career, it becomes a different situation. The needs change. When they're getting near to retirement, the needs change. How do you take that into account within the context of your strategy, your brand, and your culture, with the leadership creating the right environment and the right skill to be able to move them along, from bringing them in at the recruitment stage, making sure that they're ready to perform and fit into the organization, give them the right job, set them the right expectation, make sure they get the right feedback, make sure they're assessed consistently and fairly, help them develop, move them along their career, and when they leave, let them leave as ambassadors. Let them leave having fulfilled value for themselves, having been glad to have come on the journey with you, and you're glad to have had them with you. Positive intent is incredibly important. Andy very briefly talked about, okay, some people might be helped to go and work in another environment and pursue their careers elsewhere. I have exited thousands and thousands of people, unfortunately. Let me tell you something. This is stamping on someone's dream. It's a very emotional thing. They came to work with some certainty. They knew where the income was coming from. They knew who the boss was. They knew who the team members were. They knew what was expected. And you are saying to them, no, you can't be here anymore. You're going to go elsewhere. And it affects their whole family. It affects the whole world. It's a big thing. And how you do it, no surprises. Person being prepared. You know, it's really, really important to think through that. But same with, you know, rejecting people when they're not selected to be recruited for you. How do you keep them as ambassadors? There's a whole element to the art of how you do this right. At every stage, it's very complex, but it all needs to hang together and be integrated. And again, it requires an enormous amount of technology. You know, headcounts, budgets, titles, all of that. What's the metrics we're using? What language you're using? You know, who's going to be measuring the results? Who is this person? What capability do they have? What qualification they have? What else can they do for us? How do I know where they fit in our investment model, in the 9-box grid? Is it correct or not? How can I confirm it? Are they going to stay? How is this person reducing a risk? And then where do they fit in the future of the organization structure? How do I deal with their weaknesses and strengths to maximize the impact they're going to have? And how do they have a growth plan that's realistic with the right investment? Input, process, output. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Push for quality through input, pull for quality from output. The middle is what all the focus is. Do you know something? If I was to take an HR person's average amount of time spent, I would say 75% of the time spent in the middle, getting the 9-box grid, confirming it, and actually what they should be doing is really getting to know the individual, really understanding who they are, what they want, what their capability is, how the business functions, so where the business needs really are, and then how you use it to bring value when you implement it. And most people, they don't do that because the glory, the political win is when you've delivered that 9-box metrics, where you've reduced their risk profile. That's where the glory is, the solution, not understanding the need, which is on the input, and then understanding the value created, which is at the back. So you find that most HR departments are the worst functions in measuring and tracking their capability because they're not sure of the value they're creating. That's my personal bugbear on that. Let's talk about development. So say you've got yourself this plan. Now you want to generate solutions to grow your own. You've made the decision where you're going to outsource, what you're going to recruit, and where you're going to optimize role through organizational design change. And all of those are separate subjects. All of them could be different sessions that I would have with you guys, because all of those need to be done and they're enormously important. But let's focus on learning and development and say, right, this is the solution that we found for the people we need to develop. Traditionally, we said they would go through training. Here is a content-based, leader-orientated teach. You teach them. What's happened is, because of what's going on in the world, we've moved away from that towards learning, where you, right now as students, are responsible for your learning. I'm responsible for providing you with the opportunity, facilitating that if you want to use it. We often talk about whether it should be learning. I mean, Andy talked about it as well, whether it should be learning on the job, or in the classroom. In Vodafone Italy, I remember we used to call it being in the gym or on the road. Are you going to be on the road learning, or are you going to be in the gym? And when we talk about IBM and Google case study later, that's what we're talking about there. And there's been a move towards more activity-based, more experiential learning. I've pulled out here for you some of the theory on how people learn. And I'm going to run through them very quickly with you, because these are meant to be note sheets for you rather than we go through every item on this slide. And I want to give you some caution. Remember when we talked about how people learn in the first session? Naturally, different people like to learn differently from each other. And therefore, the balance between these different learning techniques is different based on the individual and their preferences. So a cognitive learning process is where you think about something, cognitive, where you theorize about it, where you get to understand it in the model of your world. And it's based on facts, it's based on logic, it's based on demonstrations you've seen, and that's what you've seen. It's a cognitive model, and you can see the theorists who've talked about this. You have a behavioral model. So, okay, you know what? I'm going to practice, see what happens. Babies try to stand, they fall over until they don't fall over anymore, and they've learned how to walk. You know, you do something and it goes wrong till it goes right, and you've learned. And you learn by behavior, you learn from watching mentors, watching other people, by avoiding their mistakes, and you do that. And it's about positive and negative reinforcement, as it says there. And it talks about Skinner there. Skinner, of course, is famous for his Skinner box, where he used to put the rats to find the cheese, and clearly, all the different animals are also learning like we do with experimentation. Constructism is the idea that you build on existing knowledge. You're not going to jump to be a guru on something without going through the steps in the learning. And you're building on existing learning and existing capability, one step at a time. And that you need to do that in building blocks for people to ultimately get to where they are. Connectism is saying, you know what? Something that you know is very similar to something else that you know. Perhaps that'll help you learn it faster, because similar skills, similar thinking process, and the connection between those things is what creates the learning opportunity. And the transformational learning, which we talked about with Kolb. Here is the cycle, and you need to have self-awareness. You need to have the ability to reflect on what happened in your history in the past, theorize about it, make a plan about what to do things better next time, and then do it again and do it again, and until you fly as a butterfly, having experimented. And it requires self-knowledge, it requires humility. The traditional martial art movie where the guy goes up to see the guru, and the guru is pouring tea and says, I'm here to learn. And the guy said, I can't teach you, your cup is too full. You have to empty your cup first, because you have all kinds of assumptions, you have all kinds of egos. I'm trying to learn Wing Chun right now for the last few months, but I spent decades doing Taekwondo. And I often wonder, wouldn't it be easier if I went in without having this preconception of body posture, balance, weight, whatever? It would be easier for me to learn it fresh. So you need to be aware of that kind of thing as well. It's right. So this is how this research, and there's lots of research like this, by the way, but this is from McKinsey, into the top 50 US companies, showed the value that came from different learning and development activity. And most of it shows that actually traditional classrooms are very low impact. You get invited to go to a nice hotel or to a nice classroom, sit down and listen. And maybe you listen, maybe you don't. Maybe you believe the person, maybe you don't. Maybe you actually believe it, and that makes you conscious about some of the things you're incompetent about. And then Monday morning, you go back to the same office with the same boss, with the same team, with the same situation. And what do? You do what you've always done, or you do something different because of the training course you've been on. The evidence is that it takes 48 hours before you go back to doing what you've always done. And less than 5% sticks. Less than 5% sticks. Imagine the cost of those programs. And then you got this escalation of value when you're on the job learning, when you're practicing, when you're in a project that you haven't done before, when you've done job moves. What do you think is the developmental impact of a global move to another culture as an executive, to be an expat, which we're going to talk about next week? What do you think? Where do you think that sits on this chart? Anyone? What do you think? I will tell you, in my personal experience, but also experience of what I've seen from other people, there is no experience I've come across that has as much developmental opportunity, but is as high risk for the company and the individual as a global executive expat move. Because it is part of what we call the hero's journey. You're throwing someone in the deep end. You're taking huge risks, risk of a new culture, new boss, new team, new role. There are multipliers of risk. They're not plus riskers, they're multipliers. They make the risk huge. But the benefit to the individual, the benefit to the company potentially is also huge, gigantic. That for me sits at the top right-hand corner, maybe even off this chart, as a developmental opportunity for someone. This is a model that I've applied in the past as a build on as well for how you build the capability one on the other. And I remember sharing this with you on the first module when we talked about the fact that you can't be leading other people unless you're leading yourself. Self-awareness, humility, personal discipline, building up a personal learning opportunity for yourself before you lead others, and start understanding how followership works. And then building performance teams, multicultural teams, creating a situation where things are happening without you even, because you've created the environment. Leading innovation and change, and then leading strategically, leading the business, creating the culture, creating the values, creating the reason for the business to be within the community, business sustainability, ethics, authenticity. That's all in the end. And these are the modules I used to design at different stages for people. And it's an example of the kind of build on that we're talking about. And almost every company you come across will have something like this. They will take a cut of the people at that level, say these people are potentially for the next level, or we're going to, and they will get something extra. Remember what we said about the investment model. And they will get different programs, e-programs, whatever, as they go up the ladder. So this is how, in my opinion, you improve the integrated talent. First, you make sure those senior managers take ownership. If HR is doing it on their own, it's not going to work. Start with a simple design. Remember the levels of maturity we talked about? You can't jump to the end one at a time. Focus on the improvement to the quality of the data. How do I know this is high potential? How do I know this person is going to deliver? How do I test that? Make sure that you've got all the managerial stuff out of the way. Often we talk about whether, next week we will, how much of this headcount is centralized? How much of it belongs to the home country? How much of it belongs to the host company? Who controls that budget? How do you make cross-functional moves happen like that? How do you manage the balance between the investment on the 90%, 95%, and the investment on the 5%? How much of investment on the young talent at the bottom? How much of the investment on the senior people at the top? Make sure that you're constantly checking for change and redesign the process all the time, continuously improving it. And take, making responsibility very clear. Whose champion is this? Who owns it end to end? And make sure that you're changing structure and that you're taking the stakeholders with you. And there is no magic wand. This is all going to cause mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not taking risks that you should be taking, which means that you have to learn from those mistakes and continuously improve. There is no magic, there is no guarantee, but there's a journey and you need to continuously improve it. Okay, let's talk about our case study. What did you guys think about Google and IBM? This time, you guys need to talk because this is the case study. I can't, this session is not designed for me to tell you about the case study. I can tell you what I think, but I think it's best if you guys share your opinions. So there are lots of questions. These questions are here to trigger in your mind the kind of things you should be considering. But overall, what did you think was the real difference in the approach between Google and Google and IBM? Anyone? You guys here? Is everyone here? Don't tell me I've... Oh, you guys are here. Good, 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 good. Thank God.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Of course I can. Of course I can. How are the approaches between Google and IBM different to each other in how they develop their talent? Come on, anyone? No, nobody wants to have a go?
Google is a field training.
That's right. They sent them to Bangalore, then they sent them to Japan, then they sent them to China. They've asked them to go into the field, into bazaars, into the community, didn't they? So it's what we used to call on-the-road training, whereas IBM is more traditional, is in the classroom. Isn't that right?
And IBM is in-house training.
In-house training, that's right. Which one do you prefer? Which one do you think is better?
I think field training.
You prefer the field training?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, remember, IBM has been around for decades. IBM is an old company. Google is very new. Google had no training, had no budget, had no history. They just created something from scratch, right? So they didn't have the problem of legacy. They didn't have the problem of this is what we've always done, which is IBM did. And we're going to do what we've always done, but we're going to improve it, is what IBM did. Google, no, they came up and did something completely innovative because they never had anything before. Remember, it's what I was saying before about learning something new with, if you knew something before, you have to unlearn that first before you learn something new. So for IBM, maybe it was different, right?
Yes.
What about the context, the fact that, their businesses are different to each other? Maybe the culture, therefore, is different. And because their business is different, Google is an innovative company is an innovation culture. IBM has lots of existing things they're selling. Just they're more of a cash cow. How is that going to impact their leadership development?
Maybe the IBM, like they prefer the existing model,
Yeah.
they don't think about the innovation about the company.
Or, in some companies, innovation is different. In a company that has had long history, innovation is continuous improvement. In a company that's never had anything, innovation is light bulb. Okay, I have a new idea. Bang, let's just think. This is what I'm saying. IBM is an old company. There are people there who've always done this. The expectation of the people is also set by what they've always done. Google, the new people going in, they have no expectation. They never did anything. The line managers don't say, oh no, this is what we've always had. I want the same. I got good results from it before. I want the same. That's what IBM say.
Yeah.
See, this is what I mean. There's not one system fits best. There is a movement. I mean, I'll give you this, and we talked about this. There's a movement to more experiential learning, to be on the road, to be in the community, because people are now seeing that has more deeper emotional impact. Because the truth is, learning is also an emotional experience. It's not just intellectual. Remember the different ways of learning we learned? Cognitive, okay, is intellectual. But not everybody learns best that way. And if you're going to create something that lasts, emotional content is important. And you don't get that in the classroom. You get that experiencing those people in the bazaar who'd never heard of Google, or how much savings you can make in the bazaar in negotiating. I actually used to do that. I ran a program in Egypt where I used to take people after the classroom in the evening to Khal Khalili Bazaar, and I used to give them a budget, and they had to go and see how much of a discount they could get and what behavior they displayed. How they made friends with the guy, how they found a connection with him, whether it was religious, cultural, or whatever. How they then used that, how they then used the threat of leaving, how did they use the compromise, how did they use these strategies and in how to negotiate. And that's what I used to train them on. And that was the thing. You put them in the classroom, you give them the basics, the cognitive, and then you take them for the experiential after, so that the theory you gave them makes sense. They could see it in real life. In most of these situations, guys, the balance is in the blend. It's in the how-to. Both of the approaches are valid. Because imagine this. Imagine if you're telling someone to do something risky, and they go out and they fail. They fail because they didn't know, right? And they die, or they kill someone. You can't afford that level of failure. Yeah, we are saying mistakes and failure are learning opportunities. Yeah, fair, maybe, but small learning, or learning that you can manage, not learning that is too big a detriment. Somebody goes and does something that destroys your company's brand and your company's reputation, or blows up a nuclear facility, something. I mean, there needs to be reason. So in order to do that, you need a blended learning. You need to say, okay, watch me first, show me, understand the theory, now practice. Because I've reduced the risk by blending the kinds of approaches that you could have. Are you with me? So like most of these cases, there's no right or wrong. One, there's context, which is IBM's history, background, and business is different to Google's, and therefore maybe different solutions work. Second thing is, even when there is a drive towards experiential learning, there is a blend that's necessary to give you the optimum results with optimum risk. Are you with me? So last question, guys. If you're the consultant advising Google and IBM, what would you advise them to do to improve?
Like mixed both the maybe the innovation and the cash cow.
Excellent. Yeah, brilliant. For Google, you do some classroom first preparation before you go. When we come next week to talk about expat, This is what we used to do to minimize the risk. You give them a 1 day, 2 day training on that culture, on the history, on the language, on the company, before you drop them in the deep end into that company, so that they're, less chance of failing. Same here. And with IBM, I guess more go out into the road, more balance there. Okay, before I leave this, anything else, any other insights that anybody wants to share from this case study? Did you enjoy it? Was it useful to you?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, excellent. Okay, so that's the end of our session. Next week, we're going to be talking about expats and global mobility. Because when we talk about global leadership, you can't get away from the fact that you need sometimes to be globally present somewhere in person, or move there, or to manage in a different culture. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I've got a chapter about this in my book. So I've used a lot of stuff that I had in my book as part of the thing. And I'm bringing a gentleman called Navid Nazimian, who is the group management development for Vodafone, and moves people around. And he's Iranian, brought up in Germany, and working in UK right now. And he's just written a book called Executive Transition. And he's very much talking to lots of big companies and lots of consultancies and lots of conferences about how you minimize the risk of executive transition. And he's going to be talking to us about that next week. There's also a case study I'd like you to look at, which is Living the Dream in Hong Kong, which is about the move to Hong Kong. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Hong Kong, and I used to go to Hong Kong quite a lot, so I'm familiar in some degree with it. And that's what we're going to talk about next week when we come to talk about it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
In order to give you something to think about, I want you to think before the next session about these two subjects.
Okay.
If you had to move countries to work, what country would you like to go work in, and why? And next week, when we all start our session, we'll start with this. We'll start with you telling me which countries you think you would like to go work in the future, and why.
Like what part will be specifically focused on?
I'll leave it up to you. You can say, I want to go to United States. You can say, I want to go to California. You can say, I want to go to LA. You can say, I want to go to Orange County. I don't care.
Okay.
But just your view, and I want this to be real. If you're going to be global leaders in the future, what are the places in the world that you want to be leading people in? What countries?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. Brilliant.
Anything else, guys? Any questions? Anything? I mean, we're finishing about 15 minutes early. I hope you're okay with that. But if there is anything else, I'm here. Anything you want to know, anything you want to ask questions, there's no reason for us to end the session if you want to continue. So please tell me any questions, anything you want to talk about.
Oh, excuse me, sir.
Please go on.
I have a question about the group work presentation.
Yes.
So, do you have a list that it can show me which group am I in, or show me who is my team group?
Actually,
yes.
The Outlook have been sent the email to you, dude.
Yeah, Elena is sending all that.
Yeah.
They're all there. Plus, yeah, I've also made a list of potential subjects that you might want to choose from, but it's up to you to choose whatever you want to present.
Okay. So I didn't receive the email. So
check with Elena, please.
Okay, thank you.
She does that as the administration, and she'll be able to, because if there's a problem getting emails, maybe it's a bigger problem.
Okay.
Maybe you can fix that. No problem at all. Yeah, those presentations are going to be on Zoom for everyone, as I said, but they're going to be live so that we can ask questions, but they'll be recorded for the external examiner too. Make it a subject you care about. Make it a subject that interests you. Make it a subject that is future orientated, that is important. That's my advice. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
I want to say that is that presentation in the video, or it's just a live?
No, it'll be on Zoom. It'll be like this.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. But like I said, it's going to be on Zoom for everyone. So even the people who are in person in Leeds, just so that everything is done in a consistent way and that everybody's in the same situation. We're going to do everything on Zoom.
Okay. Lovely.
Wonderful. Anything else? Okay, you can always contact me. I do on LinkedIn because until yesterday, I didn't have access to my emails. So I do apologize if you'd emailed me before on university email and I hadn't responded. It's because I hadn't seen it until yesterday. But I would always respond very quickly. So if you haven't heard from me, please do assume that I haven't seen it, because I would never leave it more than 24 hours to reply to anyone. That's just my personal rule. I am on LinkedIn. So if you're not sure that I'm getting things through the Leeds University communication tech systems, you can always contact me on LinkedIn and I will always respond. There's only one Masood Golshani on LinkedIn, which is amazing. I thought there would be more people with my name, but there isn't. Good to see you guys. Thank you for your time and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good week.
You too.